Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. I'm Joseph Katz, and I'm here again with my co-host, Mary. How are you doing today, Mary?
I always give the same answer, but it really is authentic. I'm very excited to be here with you, Joseph, and we have two amazing guests that I'm very excited to share with our audience.
Excellent. I was feeling a little lonely before we jumped on to do this recording, so why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest? And we have two of them today.
Yeah, let's dig into that loneliness piece too, because I really do want to hear that. And I think our audience does, and I know that our guests do. So without further ado, we have Deb Bibbins and Gary Sekorski. They're the founder and co-founders for All Ages, a nonprofit dedicated to connecting the generations and inspiring action to end loneliness, reduce ageism, and improve health. That's just amazing. They are both retired from careers in the for-profit space, and they're actively working to improve social health for people of all ages. Deb and Gary, welcome to the Prime Life Podcast. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you created For All Ages.
Well, thanks so much for having me on today and having Gary on. We're really thrilled to be here. We founded the organization 5 years ago after watching family members suffer from the unfortunate consequences of loneliness and isolation, and thought that what better way to improve social connection for people than by connecting them across the generations.
Well, thank you, Mary and Joseph, for having me as well. Deb and I are longtime friends, and she reached out to me to see what I was doing at that same time. And I'd been mentoring children, and I saw the value of an older adult, just lending a hand in all sorts of ways and making a difference with a younger adult. So it was kind of a natural fit. We kind of think we were meant to be. And so we formed the organization, and we've been going forward ever since.
Yeah, over the past 5 years, we've connected more than 2,000 people for approximately 10,000 hours of impactful enjoyment, connecting and having fun together.
That's amazing. 10,000 hours is, you become an expert, I think, right? After 10,000 hours of doing something. There are lots of organizations or groups that, intergenerational connections, kids working with grandparents and so on, doing different things. You chose loneliness, and you explained a little bit why. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how the program works and what these intergenerational meetings look like.
Sure. So we host a variety of in-person and virtual programs and events throughout the year. Each of them are aimed at different populations. Sometimes we're connecting elementary school kids with older adults. Sometimes it's high school kids with older adults. It really varies. And our most popular program has turned out to be a virtual program that we created out of necessity during the pandemic that connects a college student with an older adult for a weekly call during the college semester. It's been tremendous. We're on our 8th semester of this program right now, and we have 90 people participating. So 45 older adults and 45 college students from 6 universities.
I'll offer another example. One of the biggest things that differentiate For All Ages with a lot of, and just hundreds, if not thousands of other organizations, is we do our best to connect people intergenerationally, because we feel that's really kind of, handling two problems at the same time. The younger adults being actually more lonely than the older adult population. A lot of people don't realize. And one of our biggest programs and most successful programs is actually small in quantity, but very impactful. It's a fishing derby where we have older adults, both male and female, basically teach a child, usually like a grade school age person, male or female, on how to fish. And they make kind of a connection during the day, just doing something very simple in almost a mentorship kind of good friends kind of way. And that's really a nice, it's a very impactful, simple, but yet impactful program that really is a foundation of what we do every day.
So you really are teaching someone how to fish.
Yes,
literally. Literally. One component of our mission is also ageism and reducing ageism. Ageism goes both ways. Many people think that it's just young people that are, thinking not so well about older adults. Sometimes we've got the reverse happening that we see frequently too. And so what we try to do is foster, people really thinking highly about the older adult population and about aging. We try to find opportunities to bring people together so that older adults have the opportunity to have a purpose and to showcase their wisdom. And when we can do that and do that successfully, it helps the older adult feel good about himself or herself, but it also helps that younger person understand better that aging can be seen in a really positive light.
Well, I love what you just said, Deb. And Gary, I want to just touch upon what you said about fishing. My husband often recounts fishing with his dad when he was very young. And he did do a lot of activities with his dad, but that was one of them. And it was very peaceful and fun. And his dad seemed to be kind of low key. He was kind of wound a little tightly. And I myself went fishing with family friends, and we just had a ball. So I love that you shared that example because I can imagine the joy that it brings. So thank you for that. I'd like for you to touch upon what is social health and why is it important? Why should we care about it?
Sure. So social health is maybe a new term for a lot of people. More and more people have been talking about it over the past 5 years or so, really since the pandemic. Social health is the foundation of our mental and physical health. And social health is all about having positive social connections in our lives in a way that gives us a sense of belonging and a sense of community that is joyful. And when we think about what happens when we don't have the amount of positive social connection that we believe we need, that's what leads to loneliness. And loneliness has so many detrimental mental and physical health impacts. We've got people around the world that are studying that now, and more is coming to light about the impacts. But you just start with anxiety and depression, substance use, sometimes suicide, gun violence. And then when you're thinking about, the employee, so for any employers out there that are just thinking about how to help their employees want to feel that sense of connection and sense of belonging in the workplace for sure. And we know that lonely employees are less productive, have higher rates of absenteeism. And so by having our employers around the United States think positively about this topic, it's going to help the employees and the employers at the same time.
I guess what I would add too is, over these several decades, probably for 5, 6, 7 decades now, there's been a lot of changes culturally, right? The way we communicate, the way the family unit functions. Years ago, the father went off to work and mom stayed home and did the housework and raised the kids. And well, that's obviously not the way it works anymore. And unfortunately, such a simple concept of, connection and being with your family and your friends has kind of diminished. It's not necessarily anybody's fault. But a good example would be, 55 plus communities. Okay, now the kids get out of college or they move on to the workplace. And you turn 55 and, you're supposed to move on the other side of town because that's where 55 plus people should live because they're downsizing and everything. And although inherently it's not necessarily a problem, But think about how that can automatically segregate an older adult to no longer feel connected. It's a simple concept, but it really matters. And we see this all the time with the programs that we launch. The magic happens right away. You know, you're bringing a younger kid to that fishing pond with the older adult. I often say, we often talk about with our various programs is, who doesn't light up in a room when a young child enters? You know, or if an older adult shows a younger child how to do something, or mentor in a mentoring role. You know, that is just such a big thing. And I will just add this little thought to the conversation, which is very impactful. We think of social connection just like food and hunger. When you're hungry, your body needs food. When you're lonely or feeling disconnected, well, what should happen? We need to be connected. So you need to talk with people, connect with people. And it's very much the same thing, right along with Deb was saying about the pillar of social, mental, and physical health.
Yeah, loneliness has the stigma associated with it, which is one of the things we're trying to reduce. You know, we, as Gary mentioned, we want people to think about it like they think about hunger, and it simply means you need social connection. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. You know, I can share just really quickly, at one of our very first intergenerational programs that we ran, we did it with a group of Girl Scouts, young Girl Scouts, brownies, 4 and 5 year olds, and we brought them into an adult living community to paint rocks with a group of older adults. And everyone had a wonderful time. All the Girl Scouts were left, as you know, together with their troop, and this one young girl comes running back into the room and said to me, "Do you think it would be okay if I gave my new friend a hug?" And I looked at the older woman and she said, "Come on over and give me a hug." Absolutely. And so after that, our very first program that we ran, that happened. We knew we were onto something. And we've had so many other stories like that. But forever, you know, that will hold a memory in my mind of, you know, why it is we're doing what we're doing. And we reflect on that and other examples quite frequently.
That's a great story.
So interesting, because we talk about on Prime Life Podcast, we say living longer, living better. And I'm just kind of like putting together what you just said about the hug, but also when we've talked about blue zones on our program before, and one of the main elements of those that live longer, the greatest number of centenarians, is because of the social connections.
Yes.
And I also want to touch upon what Gary said about the changing dynamics over the years in culture. I'm from an Italian family, and it used to be on Sunday, everyone got together at grandma's and you had Sunday dinner. Didn't matter what you were doing, you were going to stop to do that. It was usually 3:00. Plenty of food, laughter, fun, whatnot. And, you know, that's changed. I understand people are busier. It seems like we're, you know, again, 2 people in the family working, trying to get kids to sports and other things, and those that have, you know, religious affiliations. So you layer on that. It's not an excuse, but I do agree with you. And I also think that people have moved away. Some, you know, for example, I have 2 grown adults. They live in the next state over, luckily not too far. I know Joseph can also comment on that with his grown adults. So it is so important. And we've heard statistics on our program before about the effect of loneliness and what kind of an impact, you know, it can certainly have. Joseph, you know, sorry, I kind of cut in front of you a little bit, but
That's okay.
I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. I was just thinking about something. I think Gary said it early on. The name of the organization is For All Ages. But Gary, I think you mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that younger adults are experiencing a greater degree of loneliness than older adults. Maybe just, I know most of the people listening to this are probably in the older adult category, but, you know, maybe they could help the younger adults, you know,
Sure.
in the reverse way. So maybe talk a little bit about that for a minute or two.
You know, that statistic comes as a shock to many, many people. Deb and I ourselves, you know, we started this out. We didn't really necessarily know all the data behind it. What we have learned is a tremendous amount of data. The statistics have been measured and taken, surveys have been taken across the world. So it time and time again, as also as reported by the U.S. Surgeon General's report last May, is that 18 to 22-year-old, that college-age kid, doesn't have to be a college age, doesn't have to be a person in college, but certainly that age group, is the loneliest. And that's self-reported. And that's such a tragic thought in a way, right? I mean, here you expect that vibrant young adult to be out there and, hitting the world, with both feet forward. And yet that's not really the case. There's a lot of studies going on right now that are addressing that. One obvious question we often talk about and get is social media a big thing? It certainly is, and we're trying to get our heads around that. But just technology in general, right? I mean, you can pick up your cell phone and talk around the world. Boom, done. Text messaging. I often know this when you remember back when cell phones first came out, text messaging used to be called SMS, short message service. And no one thought that it was going to be a big deal. It's like, well, if you want to just tell your husband, you're going to be home for late, that's all it was for. And look at what texting has done. It's like a lot of technologies, right? It's a fantastic way. We all have a fully functional computer in the palm of our hands every day. But on the other hand, what has that done? Well, now you don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to go next door to see your neighbor or pick up the paper or whatever it is. You just text them. There's commercials that talk about it. If somebody can't hear them, then they're texting each other and sending a phone call because you can't hear the dinner's ready. So it's an unfortunate byproduct perhaps, but it's something that's here to stay. And one of the things that we try to do is awareness, right? How do we make people aware of this, and how do you change it? It's not really that hard, but it does take a little effort.
And put some guardrails around it. That's one of the things that Senator Chris Murphy is working on. He's proposed federal legislation to do that, and I don't know whether it'll get passed this session or not. But certainly it's something that we all need to be thinking about, not only for our children, if we have children, but be thinking about for ourselves. How do we teach ourselves that we don't need to be on that phone looking at social media 24/7? Put the phone down, have dinner together with the family or with your partner, whatever your home life is. One of the things that's really tragic is the fact that social media is open to all of us, but for older adults, sometimes the lonely older adults go looking for social connections, and we've got predators out there that are scamming older adults and stealing their money. And so I know that there's attorneys general across the United States that are trying to get their arms around that, but it's a problem today.
It's a great point you bring up, Deb. We've had individuals on our podcast that have talked about just that same topic about scamming 55 plus. We've also found out that actually the younger generation equally gets scammed. Yes. And that's been a growing problem. And it's shocking to people because they just think, those that are older, maybe they're not aware, easier scam because, again, loneliness, looking for connections. And there are all types of scams on the, in the digital space. So, right. I think that's great. I love that you talked about Senator Murphy, and I would like you to touch upon, if you and Gary wouldn't mind, the efforts in the state of Connecticut where we are located to end loneliness, because I think that's very powerful. When I connected with you, Deb, on LinkedIn, when I heard about what you and Gary were doing, I also noticed our state of Connecticut, what we are doing in the state of Connecticut. Yes. And I was very impressed, and I was also alarmed in a way, like, wow, I didn't realize loneliness had gotten to these proportions. So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about...
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, Visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
About that.
Sure, happy to. I'll start with saying that more than 60% of us are feeling lonely, and this was pre-pandemic, and it's at the current state. During the pandemic, that number went up to about 85%, but 60% is an epidemic level. And so following our Surgeon General's declaration of loneliness as an epidemic almost a year ago, we started convening, we, for all ages, started convening the Connecticut Collaborative to End Loneliness. And it's really a cross-sector alliance of leaders and experts across the state of Connecticut from a variety of backgrounds that are offering their expertise as to how we might be able to improve social connection for Connecticut's residents of all ages. We've got multiple goals out there. People can see that on the Collaborative's website. We have started with trying to think about what is the common thread of where people go every year that we might be able to start to formulate a solution. And so we've started with healthcare providers. We've pulled together healthcare providers and health insurers to talk about getting loneliness as part of an annual physical exam, similar to depression screening. And obviously what the clinicians say is, okay, we can screen for this, but then what? What happens? What types of opportunities do we share with people? What are the solutions? There are so many opportunities in current communities today that people don't know exist or they don't think about. And sometimes it's the fact that they're lonely and they are a little bit intimidated about taking that step out of their comfort zone to go meet a new group of people that they've never met before, to join a photography club or to go to a yoga class or whatever it is locally. And so the combination of reducing the stigma, getting healthcare providers to talk about it, and getting people to talk about the importance of it, that's where we're starting in the state of Connecticut. And so, yes, we have connected with Senator Murphy. He has a representative on the steering committee. The Lieutenant Governor has connected with us. She's starting her own efforts, mainly focused on Connecticut, various departments within the state of Connecticut, but obviously is in lockstep with what we're doing and has asked to collaborate and be a part of it. Gary and I were just at the Legislative Office building on Monday, testifying in support of a bill that's going to create a working group in the legislature to start thinking about loneliness. So it's very exciting that it feels like we have kickstarted these efforts in Connecticut, along with Senator Murphy, in a really powerful way. It's taken, say, 50 to 70 years for us to get to where we are, so change won't happen immediately. But our view is that's not a reason not to start. And so maybe, Gary, you'd like to share a little bit about the conversation series we're hosting.
Sure. So the way that Deb and I decided to kind of tackle this issue is, number one, awareness, right? How do you get the conversation started? Back to Deb's point around stigma and your question. So we originally thought, okay, well, let's hit the whole state because, for all ages, although I think we're very mighty, but we're also very small, and we're not in every town. So our idea was to create this conversation series and go throughout pockets of Connecticut. And we ended up picking about 6 metro kind of suburban areas, or, kind of rural suburban areas, but near a major town, let's say. So Bridgeport, for example. We're going to do a program in Trumbull, so it's right north of Bridgeport. And the idea is we have a panel of experts with people that actually have real life experiences so that people can see the impact and the result and what's going on with a person's life right now about loneliness. And that's kind of part one of this series. And then we go to a little kind of audience participation where we ask questions about what's available in your town. What do you think might be helpful with the people you know and for yourself about how we can improve social connection? And we've done 3 so far. And I'm proud to say that it's been very well received. It's been very well attended. And I think it's because it resonates with so many people, right? Back to that 6 out of 10. I'll bet you know somebody who has suffered or is suffering from loneliness in some way, shape, and form. And it varies for everybody. So, we know it's a need. What that really means is that there's a need for all this. And so that's how we're addressing it right now. And it's working out very well so far.
I think the word everyone's looking for is a cure.
The cure.
The Wall Street Journal had a article. I don't remember, it was last week, 2 weeks ago. The loneliness cure. I don't remember the exact details of the article, but being in a business publication, when there's a need, some businesses are going to pop up, and so I'm sure there's some businesses that are working on, helping to solve loneliness. But I want to just challenge the social media comments. Now, I don't disagree that social media has created loneliness, but there are some potential positives from social media, right? You can meet some new people. Sure. You can, you were talking about, the hiking group or whatever it is like that. So what's the balance, right? Like how should people think about that, meeting new people versus being sucked into this void of where everyone's life is perfect?
Yeah. I think where the trouble with social media comes in is the fact that on social media, people are only showing their best selves. They're not showing their authentic selves. And so when others look at what they perceive to be a well-rounded background of an individual, it's only the best of the best that people just choose to portray on social media. And others, you can't live up to that, right? And people try. And then when they don't, it starts to make them feel really disappointed in themselves. And I think that's where we've got to think about how do we get people to understand that what they're seeing on social media isn't the full flavor of an individual. And I don't have the answer to that other than we just need to talk about it.
If it's on the internet, it has to be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, there's so many teens and youth that believe that, Joseph. And so that's what we need to try to change.
And I'll add this, Joseph, to your point. Certainly, it's not all negative. It's not all bad. No. And here's a great example. As you probably know, a vast majority of older adults, they're choosing to age in place. A very small percentage, relatively small percentage of people actually go to an adult living community or off to the condominium complex in Florida and all that kind of thing. Most people choose to stay home for lots of reasons. One is financial. Some of the adult living facilities are very expensive, even without additional care. But so knowing that, though, how do we reach those people? So our biggest way to reach people who are aging in place is actually social media. So that's a great way, right? We post something on the community page on Facebook, for example, and we've gotten we've got a lot of participants that hear about us because of that. So that's certainly a great tool, right? It's like the internet. It's a great tool, but it often misused, no different. So that's a really good thing. But to Deb's point too, that it does create competition. I was just thinking of a funny story. People post their vacations, right, when they're on the beach in Florida or Cancun or whatever. I don't see anybody posting, like when their lawnmower breaks in the back of the yard at 100-degree heat. You just don't see those bad things.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that goes across the spectrum. But I love that you're getting the word out through social media. And I would encourage you to use some social listening, which a lot of companies and organizations don't talk about. And Joseph and I are marketers, so we can't help but say that. And so, replying to some comments, no matter where they are and what they say, and kind of letting individuals know that they're being heard and they're being valued. And I'm sure you're doing that. I'm sure that's part of the mix as you continue to grow your organization. So as we kind of get to sort of near the end of our conversation, I would like to ask Deb and Gary, what are some tips or very immediate action steps that individuals can take if they are feeling lonely, overwhelmed by loneliness, and frightened and not know what to do next? And then once we hear from you on that, and then I think, Joseph, if it's okay with you, we may go to our final question.
Sure, Mary, I'll start with that. The first thing that people can do is to think about those people in their lives who they already have a strong relationship with and reach out to them and just have a conversation. Ask them to go out to lunch. Ask them to go for a walk with them. It doesn't have to cost any money. Just have a phone call. We had one of the questions we asked during our conversations is, what action are you going to take for yourself based upon what you've heard here today? We've had people say, I'm going to call my mom. We've had people say, I'm going to call my sister who I haven't spoken to in 2 years because I kind of forgot about her because she's in an assisted living facility. We've had those really powerful statements come out of a simple conversation that we're having in the community. And so I think people need to start there. Their friends and their family that they already have strong connections with, just reach out for a call. And then the question is, what can they do within their community? How do they step out of their comfort zone a little bit and think about an opportunity to connect and to try something different, whether it be a program at the library or at the senior center or community center? That takes a little bit more nerve to do that, but we encourage people to do that. And Gary, I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
Now an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
Sure. I mean, we could probably give you lots of tips, and we often get asked the same question is, faith institutions. Even though the attendance at faith institutions is on the decline in most cases, we often hear that. Not every town has a community center, but a lot of towns do, or adjoining towns. Nearly every town, or I'll say municipality or adjoining towns, has things like a photography club, or maybe a weekly newspaper. Some people have it used to be called the Step Saver, and every weekly newspaper. Volunteerism is a great way to get involved. No matter where you live, there are opportunities to volunteer. So you have to seek those out. To Deb's point and everyone's point here today is, you do have to step out, or you have to kind of make that first move. But I will conclude my thought around that is we are social beings, and we need that social connection. And as simple as just stepping out of your house, or maybe saying hello to somebody in the grocery store line. There's movements right now about smiling and laughing more often. Simple, right? But it works. And if you, just simply talking to somebody in the line at the grocery store, right? That's not really stepping out that far. You might have to say hello or smile, but it works, right? Because they're doing the same thing you're doing. So those are some tips that we often share.
So I love your tips. Those are great ideas, and I think that they're kind of low risk, if you will.
Right.
So our final question for both of you is: you've had very successful careers. You've retired. Well, I think you've unretired personally, but
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps you have. You could do anything you want to do. You could spend your time doing lots of things. What's your why? I'll start with you, Deb, and then we'll go to Gary.
My why is because I watched a family member suffer from loneliness. I watched his health deteriorate rapidly, and I watched him pass away suddenly and unexpectedly. And I believe that loneliness played a huge part in it. I didn't understand that at the time, but he was the last of his friends to be alive, and his social network of peers, of friends, shrunk to zero, and he passed away. And I believe that we all need social connection. There aren't enough people talking about this. There aren't enough people thinking about it. And so that's my why. My why is because I don't want anyone else to suffer through what I watched a family member suffer through. And I think it's simple, right? It's simple. As Gary mentioned, the steps are easy. And so we all should be doing something to help ourselves and to help someone else. Gary?
Sure. For me, it was, I'm a longtime sports enthusiast. I played sports a lot as a younger man. I'm a longtime coach. I was one of those guys that were coaching their kids down at the Little League field and on the basketball court. And my kids kind of grew up and they're out of college and doing their own thing. And I missed that connection. Gosh, I'm like, it's Saturday morning. I should be going to the Little League field. Well, what's going on here? So that's how I reached out to become a mentor first. So my why was, maybe without me even knowing it, like what Deb was saying, I was like, I'm missing the connection that I had for so many years. So that's when Deb reached out to me and learned about what I had been doing with mentoring and, missing coaching and everything. It was really kind of a natural fit. And I said, you know what, this is what we need to do. And I think ultimately, I'll speak for both of us, is we feel good because we're making a difference, and we're really just helping people from a 5,000-foot level. We're making a difference and helping people.
Gary, Deb, thanks so much for taking the time today to chat with us. Before we go our separate ways this afternoon, let our listeners know, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to learn more about what you're doing and get involved?
Thanks, Joseph. The best way to get in touch with us is via our For All Ages website, which is forallages.org. Send us a message. Those messages come directly to me. And so that's the best way to get in touch. And sometimes it takes me a week or two to respond, but I always respond to everyone.
And you'll potentially make a new friend. One less.
There you go.
We do.
So thank you again. And to thank all our listeners for joining us. We'll be back next week with another great episode of the Prime Life Podcast. You can find us on all the streaming services. And if you want to send us a note, we would love to hear from you as well. Everyone, have a great day. And thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you,
you.
Deb, and thank you, Gary.
Great to be here.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.